start by just sort of quick introductions to see who's on our call today. So this is task team 2. Kate will give you a little orientation so you'll know sort of, I think there's 3 task teams. So so I'll start. I think I know most everyone on the call, but there might be 2 people on that I don't know. So my name is Rebecca Lundgren. I work at the University of California, San Diego, and I also work closely with IRH and Passages and the various learning collaboratives. And I'm here helping to facilitate this task team. And my colleague who reached out to some of you, Meredith, isn't feeling well today, so she's not on the call. Kate, do you want to go next?
Yeah. Hi, everybody. My name is Kate Davin. I work at the Institute for Reproductive Health at Georgetown University on the Passages Project and the Learning Collaborative, and more specifically the South Asia Learning Collaborative.
Shefa, over to you.
Hi, everybody. My name is Shefa Sikder. I work with CARE International as a senior technical advisor on our health team, and great to see everybody on today.
And then I'd like to introduce, I'm sorry, I don't know how to pronounce your name, Ashit, is that correct? Hi.
Yes, this is it. Hi, Namaste. I'm Ashit Bike from Kathmandu, Nepal. I'm participating in this meeting on behalf of Young Professional Development Society Nepal. This is the NGO working in youth sectors. Last 2014 to continue, and this is a good opportunity to meet with you and learning and collaborating with your team. And Kate Mehmet already communicate with her and explore the several working opportunity, but still not get the working opportunity directly with your university and team. This is the good team and network. I hope to get the further opportunity and learning collaborations as a partnership in the futures. Thank you.
Thank you for joining. Wonderful to meet you. Jacina?
Hi, I'm Jacina Kapungu, based in Washington, D.C., and I serve as Director of Learning and Organizational Strengthening for Women Strong International, which is a donor organization that provides funding to women-led organizations to pilot or replicate a project focused on women's health, girls' education and empowerment, economic security, and violence against women and girls.
Great, thanks Jacina. Thanks, glad you're here. Paul, over to you.
Hi, my name is Paul. I am based in Uganda at Makerere University, where I work as an associate professor. I'm very excited to be part of this meeting, and I look forward to the deliberations. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. And Paul is active in not only our sort of global, as we call it, Learning Collaborative, but also in our work in Nigeria and the East Africa Learning Collaborative also. So he brings that perspective to our work as well. So again, pronunciation is not my forte, but Olayinka, can you introduce yourself?
Hi everyone, I'm Olayinka Umar Farouk. I work for Breakthrough Action Nigeria. I'm the Senior Technical Advisor on the Integrated Social and Behavior Change team. Nice to meet you all.
Oh, great, thank you so much for joining. Alicia.
Hi everyone, my name is Alessia and I work with UNICEF in the C4D department looking at social norms in the context of the global programs for ending child marriage and FGM.
Thanks, Alessia. And let's go, I think I sort of forgot Betsy in my list. Can we go back to Betsy?
Good morning, everyone. I'm Betsy Kastenbader, social scientist at FHI 360. And I've been working with Rebecca and Kate and many of you over the last few years on the Passages Project and the Global Learning Collaborative, and recently with the Nigeria Learning Collaborative as well. So nice to see so many friendly faces.
Thanks, Betsy. And then I see Caitlin. Hi, Caitlin.
Hi, Rebecca. Hi, everyone. This is Caitlin Shannon. Like Shefa, I also work for CARE USA. I'm part of our Impact Learning, Knowledge, and Accountability team, and my official title is Research and Inquiry Lead. Happy to be part of this group.
Thanks, Caitlin. Have I missed anyone? Am I missing anyone? Looks like I have all of us. So welcome everyone. And this is great. I think we have some really interesting perspectives. Some folks who have been engaged in learning collaborative work for years, some who are newer, perspectives from different kinds of organizations, researchers, implementers. So I think this will set us up really well for our task today. So, as you know, our task is to focus in on how the learning collaborative and the regional learning collaborative should be sort of organized and governed, if you want to call it that. So I think we'll start out with Kate is going to provide us kind of a quick overview of, this whole initiative where we are with this rethinking the learning collaborative and what's going on with the other task teams as well. So over to you, Kate.
Yeah, great. So starting at that big picture, just so I know we have a few newer Learning Collaborative members, so we're all sort of coming together on the same page. We started the Learning Collaborative in 2016 and have put together a really great sort of resource portfolio of documents, tools, guidance. And at the end of that sort of first grant period, we met together at our summit in Washington, D.C. and had a lot of feedback that we wanted to transition our work to a regional perspective and to get a lot more, to move our tools into the hands of those people in the field. So over the last year or so, we've been working on creating these new regional learning collaboratives. We now have the Nigeria Learning Collaborative, or Northern Nigeria, Eastern Africa, Francophone Africa, and South Asia that are sort of in different phases of getting kicked off, but they're really all in the sort of beginning stages of development and getting started. So we're now thinking about how our global structure connects with those regional structures and how we can sort of develop a collaborative environment and set the stage for those structures and that collaboration to continue on. So we started by conducting in-depth interviews with I think over 30 global and regional learning collaborative members to get their perspectives on these different aspects of how we all come together. And we had a lot of feedback that people wanted to be more involved in the work, not just sort of consulted, but involved in substantive ways. So we thought we'd put together these task teams on 3 different processes we were trying to move forward to get volunteers like you to help with developing these different proposals and moving the work forward. So we now have 3 task teams. The first is working on revising the mission, vision, and principles of the Learning Collaborative. The second is this team working on the governance and structure of the Learning Collaborative, how we relate to each other and what those systems look like. And the third is the logo and branding, or the visual identity for the Learning Collaborative. So in these 3 teams, our overall plan is to work together in a team to develop a proposal that we are building on the interviews and the feedback we've heard so far, and building on our perspectives as diverse members of the Learning Collaborative, and putting together that proposal for a final vetting revision with the whole Learning Collaborative at some point in late January, February, and then implementing that plan with our teams. So specifically our team, as Rebecca mentioned, is Task Team 2, working on the governance and structure of the Learning Collaborative, the overall structure and how that connects to the different regional networks. And our goal for today, our goal for today was to present those, to present sort of a summary of our feedback that we've heard before, to add our thoughts or any other additional sort of comments and suggestions, and then from there move on to developing a written proposal and sort of finalizing that before that meeting with the whole Learning Collaborative.
Thanks, Kate. I just will maybe add one thing, is that although I don't know that we started out with this in mind, I think increasingly we need to think about the sustainability of these collaboratives and this network, and what's the future for donor funding, and eventually passages will end. My project at UCSD that's supporting some of the regional collaboratives will end. So in this next year and a half, I think we want to be thinking about how will that look moving forward? Where would resources be flowing to what elements of this, ecosystem, so to speak. So that's kind of, I think an underlying interest that we have also to get a strong sort of system or governance or structure up so that it can move forward independent of sort of individual projects. And then I just wanted to note that Carrie Jo just has joined. Do you want to say hi, Carrie?
Hi, team. Apologies for being a few minutes late.
Not a problem at all. So, oops. I always have some issues when I'm trying to look at everybody's faces and advance slides at the same time. So I thought just to go spend another minute or so on this. So I think Kate really sort of explained why this is important, but some of the issues that we identified were that we want to make sure that our structure, so we used to have, just one kind of organ group, and we called it the Global Learning Collaborative, just to indicate that it encompassed not just folks from the United States, but all over the world. But as now that we have new other regional learning collaboratives, the term Global Collaborative is a little odd, but we want to make sure that our structure accommodates, these new learning collaboratives and regional collaborators, and that there's, we pay attention to having an equal voice in the partnership, and that we're sort of this broader global group, and the learning collaborators are collaborating in a bi-directional way. So what I hope we can do today is, sort of vet some ideas that the people we interviewed provided, and kind of agree on a way forward, including, anything that we might need to do to get something on paper to share this with others and move it forward. So sort of a plan for next steps. So are there any questions at this point in terms of sort of the background we've laid out or our task for today? This is sort of a lot of information maybe for some of you.
Can you just, I know you said it just a moment ago, but can you list the regional collaboratives that are now up and running, although in various phases? I have South Asia, Francophone, Africa, and there was at least one or two.
Yeah, you're almost there. So the other two are East Africa. So that one is led, co-hosted by Makerere University, the School of Women and Gender Studies in Uganda and Nigeria. And I just see Hasbiala just joined, who is with MSpace, which is sort of the convening partner in Nigeria. Welcome, Hasbi.
Thank you very much, Rebecca. Hi, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon.
Hi, Hasbi.
Hi.
Sorry, just to clarify, Uganda,
go ahead, Carrie. Yeah.
Uganda and Nigeria are together as one or two?
No, they're separate. So there's East Africa, which is based in Uganda, but is more of a regional approach, has members from lots of different countries. Nigeria is focused in northern Nigeria.
Northern Nigeria, thank you.
Different, yeah. And just to further clarify maybe, so the Nigerian Learning Collaborative is funded at this point by the Gates Foundation, and convener is MSpace. And then the East Africa one is funded by the Hewlett Foundation and has, of course, different conveners. Other questions, thoughts?
Yeah, Rebecca, you mentioned, the plan for sustainability. So I guess it would be good to know like the timeline for the funding or the anticipated timeline for the current donor funding. You mentioned there's a few different donors contributing.
That's a good point. So the USAID funding, which supports passages and supports like this, specifically this work here, we have an extension of the project. So, but I would say probably a year from now, 15 months, because it's a no-cost extension. So how long we can go, depending on the funds we have, is not so clear right now. But I would say through March of 2022. And the Gates funding is similar, maybe a little bit longer. So I'd say about a year and a half of funding is what we have right now. Hewlett
Yes.
is a little less, but I think we'll be asking for no cost extension. So maybe think about a year. I think we have about a year to position ourselves. Good question.
Yeah, I would like to add one point because learning collaborating is working in the multi-sector, especially social and cultural, and lots of issues and social problems. In this component, we can add the environmental issues or climate change also, which is directly related with human behavior, social and cultural behavior impact the community, society, and it has impact to environmental issues also. If we can include the environment, which has direct related with gender issue, there is the density or other gender perspectives, we need to include in this component as our working activity in the learning collaborating. I think this is the better to add.
Thanks. That's a really useful comment. And the bigger focus really is that we started the Learning Collaborative, whatever, many years ago, and it was very focused on adolescent reproductive health. But over the years, and especially as regional communities or collaboratives have come on, it's very much expanded. And, Nigeria, there's a very strong cross-sectoral approach, looking at immunization, health. Each one has a slightly different sort of take, but I think adding in issues related to climate, for example, would be very relevant, or to the environment, to people. So that could definitely be sort of on the table moving forward. Any other questions or comments? So I'm gonna, is someone about to say something? I heard a breath. Okay, so let me move on, because what I want to do, I'm sure there'll be, okay, sounds like Carrie might want to say something. After Carrie, I give Carrie the word, I'm going to just sort of present I'm not going to sort of, I am going to present the results of the interviews that we did, and then we can just open up for discussion the rest of the call. Carrie, did you want to say something?
I'll hold mine. I'm trying to be respectful where in the process things fit. So I will mute myself and.
Okay, yeah. Just note any things you have to say, because they'll probably be, still relevant after we go through this. And I just have a couple of slides, so it's not a lot. So as you will recall, those of you who were interviewed, that we were sort of proposing two different structures, either a network of networks or a network secretariat. And the network of networks looks like this. So each learning collaborative was a hub, was a group. You have them all here, including the global one. And then they sort of interacted among each other through learning exchange meetings. So in this structure, it was sort of a looser structure, sort of a federation of networks. Right? So we call this network of networks. And then in these networks, they might choose to have working groups, like to develop a document or a resource or write a paper, et cetera. So those would be working groups that could be composed of people from all of the different learning collaboratives. The other model that we looked at was a network's horrible name, I know. We called it a network secretariat. And in this case, there was a secretariat that went across all 5 groups and made up of, several members from each of the 5 groups. So you can see it had people from the more global community, which is, largely a little bit more of an HQ focused group, folks from the South Asia, from the East Africa, et cetera. So that made up the secretariat. Sorry. Each of the 5 learning collaboratives has sort of a slightly different way that they're organized. So, for example, Nigeria has a host organization, which is MSpace. South Asia has co-hosts. The Francophone has country leads. So each has a slightly different, way of organizing themselves, but they could still all come together in the secretariat. They could have learning exchanges, just the same as the other, where there would be, working groups drawn from across the 5 groups. The difference here is that there is sort of an overarching, secretariat group that's responsible for making sure that everyone's communicating, to think about donors, to set agendas, etc. So this slide sort of this is again just what we came up with, not what our respondents said. So you can see the network of networks is more informal. There's the collaboration in that first model is really based on each learning collaborative to prompt it, to just reach out to the other collaboratives. There's learning exchanges are similar, I think, in the two models. And there is more of a shared decision making in a network secretariat, and in the other model, it's more up to each learning collaborative. So that's kind of the models that we proposed. And then after we did the interviews, so we interviewed, folks purposefully from a lot of different perspectives, the regional and the global learning collaboratives. And the overwhelming preference was the second model, the one with some sort of secretariat. So the idea was that it would be helpful to have some formal, but not too formal, convening or body to facilitate collaboration, but to still make sure to retain the autonomy of the regional networks. So the idea was that some sort of support structure would be helpful to make sure that there was collaboration and information shared. Their function could be things like fundraising, setting standards, things like what we're doing right now, developing a logo. So in a sense, that network secretariat really is the role that IRH, for example, of Passages has been playing with FHI 360 over the last few years. So it would be a clear structure with some centralized coordination. Doesn't mean that the secretariat has any sort of, power or decision making over the individual learning collaboratives, but there would be a network for talking together. And that it would need funding, at least for some part-time of some paid staff, to make sure that actions happen. So, and that another interesting point was that, it's important for the secretariat to have representation from each of the learning collaboratives. So some of the considerations that came up were, and if you recall in this first model, I'll go back really fast. This model, you see that the secretariat here is sort of up on top. Someone suggested that really the secretariat could be like on this slide where there's a circle in the middle, to try to avoid the sense that, the global learning collaborative, or that the secretariat is sort of above, and that the global learning collaborative should be equal to the other regional learning collaboratives, not take on that role of secretariat. So that it's another community, it's not the secretariat. The secretariat would be drawn from all of the 5 communities. Suggestions were shared leadership, and maybe that secretariat should rotate, every year, every 2 years, people on it could rotate. There is models that folks shared where there is like a donor supported the secretariat, and then maybe one organization held it for 2 years, and then a different organization for a couple of other years. So there's sort of different funding models that would go along with the structure. There was a suggestion to put the secretariat at the center, not at the top, and to make sure the secretariat is small, not too large. Some of the concerns raised were that the global learning collaborative, which is what we used to be before there were additional learning collaboratives, is really more of an American or Western issue focused, and maybe the name isn't right anymore. And then the crux of the matter is how these 2 points: how do the learning collaboratives interact with each other, and what is the sustainability of this model, or how do we develop a model that is sustainable? The other issue we talked about was the advisory board. We used to have an advisory board years ago, and then it sort of fell by the wayside, but it was quite helpful initially. So this would be a group of folks who would provide guidance, make connections and support resource mobilization. So we asked people, is that necessary? And the preferred option was yes, that there should be an advisory board, but it needs to adequately represent the regional learning collaboratives, respect autonomy of each of the network, and be, of course, different from the secretariat. So thoughts were to keep it light, that it would be convened by the secretariat, You can see the purposes here, linkages, visibility, sort of resource mobilization, providing strategic direction. We found in the past it was really great because there are a lot of donors and experts on it, and it sort of mobilized them to mobilize funding. I mean, that's how the funding for the Nigeria and the East Africa collaboratives happened, is the donors got together and sort of lobbied each other to each put in some money. And then there's some ideas about who the members should be. One interesting thing here is the suggestion is to have one representative from each learning collaborative on the advisory board, because one concern is that everyone sort of wants access to that because those are the donors. So you don't want to make sure it's not just, the secretariat or the global learning collaborative that has access to that body or group. So those are the key findings. There was quite a lot of consensus on the need for something like a secretariat, although probably not called that, to keep things flowing. Some of the questions that I think we can discuss, and whatever else you think of, is there some sort of hybrid model between the two, continuing to talk about how the regional learning collaboratives link with each other. All the names for these structures are sort of old-fashioned, secretariat, advisory board. Are there better names for them? We're trying to balance, really, I think, efficiency and autonomy here. That was really the question. We want efficiency, but we want to make sure everyone is autonomous too. So with that, I think I can just open the floor for folks to discuss. Reactions, thoughts, questions.
Hi.
Hi, Alicia.
Hi, Alicia. I don't know how we're doing this. So I like this, and it matches. It's interesting to hear that there was an overwhelming majority that was in favor of this structure. I also said that, but I wasn't quite sure what other people thought. So it's good to know. I think that one concern that I had, and probably other people had in expressing a sort of preference for the advisory, is the risk, and you mentioned it in your presentation, Rebecca, the risk of potentially having sort of a lack of balance or not such a balanced input from all the different collaboratives. So I think that one reflection that we need to make is thinking about potential barriers to some equal participation and how we can address those. One that comes to mind, for example, is language. We overwhelmingly use English, and that might inadvertently exclude or make it harder for our Francophone colleagues to contribute actively. So that's one barrier that I can think of, but there are probably others. I think that with the more sort of secretariat style, and I agree we can think of a better name, and I also think that it is important to have a structure to ensure that things do advance, because although in principle it's great to have to keep it flexible, in the end, maybe things don't happen if there is no structure that takes the lead in that. But really reflecting a bit on how do we strike that balance between having some sort of leadership that advances things and at the same time encourages a more flat structure where everyone is participating equally. So it's just a reflection.
Mm-hmm. Thanks. And I also should say, I don't know why I left it off. I was just, there were quite a few comments around the language issue.
Okay.
Right? Okay. That was definitely a concern. And there was other barriers where, like, time zones and things like that. I didn't really feel, I felt like,
yes.
We're pretty good at getting around those, but language is definitely.
Yeah, so in principle, I like this structure, and we just want to think about what are the potential barriers to a truly balanced participation, and that's it. I have no other comments.
Thanks. Before we move on to sort of a different comment, does anyone want to raise barriers that we should be thinking about? I think other than language. If anything, just pops in your mind right now as we're talking about this.
So one of the things that we spoke, this is Carrie Jo, one of the things that we spoke about, I'm going to put myself on video, but I'm afraid, briefly,
Yay.
is that we, the current sort of secretariat or global collaborative has, probably a lot of experience in the grant writing and management, and you've done an amazing job sort of spearheading these different initiatives. I'm very, very much in favor, and I agree with Alicia that many of my stronger concerns in terms of lack of hierarchy, but the presence of organization, that those resonated, were present in many of the others. But one of the barriers, which I think if it's built in properly to the Secretariat and to its shifting, is that there's proper capacity development and teaming to enable, that each, not in terms of necessarily capacity, but all of them are at different stages. Some have been in existence longer than others, et cetera, that the passing of the Secretariat, while there's always the chance of, creaky transitions, that it is a huge capacity builder, and to make sure that there is the opportunity to support that transition, so that the growth in holding the Secretariat is really important for the different regions and the different actors. So as long as we can sort of scaffold that transition so that each collaborative will be able to hold that and be the convener, that I think those skills, I don't think it's a barrier. I think it's a barrier that we could overcome with thoughtful capacity building or scaffolding in the expectation of how the thing, how it transfers.
Thanks. That's a really important comment. And I think one I hadn't really thought of is sort of that capacity building, strengthening, passing the baton piece of this work. Other comments?
Hi, Rebecca. This is Betsy. I have I'll put myself on video so you say hi. So quick impressions or thoughts I had is, it seems like the goal or interest when we're talking about the Secretariat is less about the governance per se, but more about the structure and so as to enable finding the synergies, right? So maybe we could call them like the cross collaborative coordinating committee or something, to make clear that it's not above, but just, bringing everyone together across. I think that might help, both just in terms of where it sits and then how it's viewed across the, quick impression.
Thanks, that's a useful comment, yeah. Other thoughts?
Rebecca, this is Jacinta. I wanted to ask, how does decision-making work across the advisory board, secretariat, and the regional learning collaboratives?
Well, that's for us to decide, I think, but I think so. Decisions about, but here's sort of how it's working right now, and although it's very much evolving. Decisions within an individual learning collaborative, including the Global Learning Collaborative, are taken by that body of people, right? And usually there's some folks leading that, the hosts typically, who are probably more of the traditional, what we would call a secretariat. So that there is some hosts that are facilitating and holding these meetings and encouraging people to engage. So those decisions are within the learning collaborative, and it could be each learning collaborative, and the process could be different, is different, I think, between each one. In terms of the advisory board, I think it's just, there is no decision making, it's just advice, right? So then I think where you really get into the more nitty gritty is this coordinating committee and what decisions they're empowered to make, in a sense. And if that committee is made up of representatives from each learning collaborative, then I think one of their tasks would be, maybe one of the tasks is to sort of, I'm thinking here, develop some kind of, I don't know what you call it, like a document, charter or something that sort of sets out what those powers are, so to speak. So my thinking is that they would need, if this is going to work the way we're thinking, they would need to be empowered with sort of resource mobilization, you know, talking with donors, getting donors engaged to support. They would probably be making decisions about communications, like external communications, like, you know, newsletters or things like that. Maybe they would make decisions about joint activities. But it's a really interesting and useful, concrete way of looking at this, Jacinta. Other thoughts? Like, and I think the question is really, what is the decision making? What is the power or the authority of the coordinating committee / secretariat?
Hi, Rebecca.
Hey, Paul.
I like the idea suggested by Betsy of the inter-collaborative kind of coordination committee or structure, whatever we need to call it. I think that is a good idea. It reflects the ideas that were shared in your presentation, and it sort of brings to force a hybrid model, which we are trying to come up with.
Mm-hmm.
And then, since that structure has representation from the different learning collaboratives, then I think that the decisions it makes would be more representative. They would be more involving of the different chapters of the learning collaborative. Thank you.
Thanks, Paul. Other thoughts?
Yes, I would like to add something. Yes, first of all, I will say from my point, I'm not sure this is right or wrong, just do not mind that. Based on my experience, I would like to add my point. We want to develop an expansion network learning collaborating as a broadly worldwide and inter-country, intercontinent and country-wise activity and almost. So first of all, we need to, this is the good consultation for these meetings to define the layer of team, committee, role responsibility, tax allocations, and everything. So from my thoughts, I feels learning collaborating is this is as a project, this is not an organization. If we want to develop the organization, or from my questions, this is organization or project, because my understanding is that learning collaborating is as a project, as a team, a work committee. So top of the committee of work project is the learning collaborative is the top. Second is the must role play the secretariat, and other will advise as an advisory committee has already proposed it. This is the not like decision panel, just advising as a suggesting as a project work. And similarly, secretariat team and committee will play the vital role to advisor committee to the tax team. So we need to allocate the certain committee or technical group. We need to identify the technical group, technical committee, what we say. Similarly, previous Paul said the steering committee. This steering committee and technical committee we can merge to especially focus the tax team. Secretary is the secretariat role play, but who is the technical work, who will take the leadership role as a technical committee, especially fundraising is the most challenging, and first of all we need to work the fundraising activity as a proposal writing, technical, financial, everything. So steering committee we can develop, or country coordination committee also we can develop as the layer of the team. This is the coordination communication on behalf of the secretariat or technical committee. Then resource team you have already proposed here, and task force team. Whose task force team is a country project activity implementer, will like overall take the leadership of the task force. That's why we need to make the layer of the layout project and role responsibility and based on the tax allocations committee and role can play to easy to work and like allocation the tax and good, we can make the good governance as a project and system. If we can make the strong team, we can get the result as a social, cultural, and every issues in learning collaborating framework from my side.
Thank you so much. Any other comments about, so it sounds like we're talking about a coordination committee, I don't know what was inter something coordination committee, making sure there's representation from each regional group on that, being sort of bounding and being clear about what authorities are, their authority is, and what were some of our other thoughts here? Other thoughts to add to those?
So I just want to jump in on Ashit's comments there, because as a researcher, the Global Collaborative has been a conglomeration of not solely researchers, but sort of a heavy dominance of researchers. So I think some of the tasks that Ashit was mentioning in terms of these sort of subgroups, do they fit into the coordinating committee in terms of obviously the pieces around fundraising, around the administrative pieces are one. Obviously, each of the learning collaboratives will also have to have their own little core structures and fundraising mechanisms. But when I think of some of the tremendous benefits of having multiple collaboratives is the opportunity to synergistically work together. And I think it speaks to funding as to how to cover the core costs of not just the secretariat, but of the individual collaboratives. So there's the core costs, and then there's the sort of activities or the research or the programs or things that we might be able to do cross country and cross region. So having some sort of a structure that is through which these cross, I'll be honest, and I'll just put it out there, in terms of research, that's really how I think about this is when I put together cross-country initiatives, it is, most of our time is putting together the structure on how we will work together and all of those things. But through the Learning Collaborative, whether it be projects or research or some other sort of technical task, as Ashit was mentioning, I think this, some sort of structure that allows that to be coordinated more smoothly and with less cost, because that's this sort of cross work, cross learning, and cross collaboration, I think is a particular beauty of having the multiple ones. So if I understand Ashit, some of what he was saying was really about these sort of tasked teams around projects in addition to the finances and the administrative pieces. And I was just curious if those would fit in this sort of convening secretariat or working group, whatever the larger structure is, if those sort of sub core themes would be represented there and proposals vetted out to the teams, to the different secretariats, because I'm in the back of my mind, I'm thinking about funding, and core funding is one thing, it's hard to get. And the other thing is how to sustain those staffing over time. And that's often done through projects, research, you know what I mean? Something that is funded that's not necessarily infrastructure. Sorry, that's a really roundabout way of.
No, I think you're really clear, Carrie. So, and I think that's a really helpful way to sort of build on this thread. So the idea is that the coordinating committee is not just to communicate among each other, right? It's also could be the home, right, in a sense, for task teams that are working on particular, yeah, I mean, we think about research, but it could be capacity building, it could be other tasks, which I think would then also, you're right, have a definite benefit funding wise, because, you know, for example, Passages, I guess, is a good example. So we have funds to do research and do different things, but a part of those funds we are dedicated to supporting this work, right? So donors are going to be more likely to want to support an activity such as research or even capacity strengthening or training. And then a piece of that could go to this core support, right? But if you're just trying to get donors to support coordinating committee, that's probably not going to fly. And so that's, I mean, it's a good idea, but I'm also looking at it from the funding perspective. It also makes sense, I think. Is there someone in the chat said, yeah, Caitlin. I second this approach. I think you're saying you're seconding the task team approach. I think that the value of the core convener is to create the connective tissue exactly between and among the learning collaboratives. That resonates for me. What do others think?
Rebecca, I find myself wondering, kind of wanting to kind of brainstorm on like the list of different tasks and thinking about then where those would reside. You know, you talked about, as I think this presentation was super helpful, but now I'm thinking about, you mentioned like a newsletter, and we're talking about, you know, funding the task teams, you know, trying to think about all the different, anyways, brainstorming on what all the different stuff might be.
Okay, let's do that for a minute. What occurs to y'all about tasks that should be, or task teams, so to speak, that are important to include?
So if I could just chip in here, the three at least that I could think of would be, one would be sort of external communications or communications. One would be maybe fundraising. One would be capacity strengthening. The other would be sort of collaborative research. So that's four. Sorry, not three.
Yeah, I think capacity strengthening could be sort of to encompass things like mentorship and such, and partnerships, you know, it doesn't have to be just, I guess, training events is what I'm saying, sort of.
Yeah, and also like peer learning. I mean, the value of having learning collaboratives that are in different regions is that, you know, they bring different strengths and experiences and contexts. And I think there's a lot that can be learned by sharing across.
Exactly. Yeah. One of the things that we built into a couple of the newer grants are mentorship. So this came as a sort of, you know, as we started to look at funding for the next generation of the Learning Collaborative, a lot of some Learning Collaborative members said, you know, it's how can you diversify so all the funds aren't just going to, you know, that supportive work like IRH, you know, or UCSD. How can we get more of those funds out to Learning Collaborative members? So it was a difficult question, given that, you know, the funding is small and there's not enough to make grants to a lot of different organizations. But what we put in were like mentorship, so that we could give individuals like small grants or honorarium honoraria to provide mentorship. And it's two-way learning, of course, but, you know, to pair people together. And I don't know, that's just kicking off in Nigeria and East Africa. We'll see how that works, but I don't know if that's the best mechanism, but it's an example of sort of peer-to-peer learning, you know. And the funding was really supposed to be like to facilitate travel and such, but these days that's not necessary. So it actually works even more efficiently. So noted about it's peer learning, not some sort of formal kind of, let's develop a course and have people come. Although I guess that's not a bad idea either. So I think, is there something in the chat? Just why did I lose my chat box? Let's see. We had, Paul, mentorship is important in capacity building. Okay, and Paul brings up something else that I don't know if this is another task for it, but it's like special issues of journals, because like journal supplements, we have found that that's very motivating for folks because it gives us all an opportunity to publish and to work together in ways that we wouldn't be able to do, or we don't do otherwise. So, yeah.
My phone ringing in the background, but that sounds like something that maybe the communications task team and the research task team could work on together, of that sort of external facing, but also research focus of a special supplement.
Yeah, and I think one of the things about task teams is they aren't necessarily enduring. So, for example, under the Global Learning Collaborative, we had funds from Gates to do a special supplement. So if there were funds to do that, then you could convene a task team, and when it's done, that task team disbands. I'm wondering, Hasbi, I don't want to put you on the spot, but I mean, you've been sort of managing a regional collaborative now for a year. Do you have any thoughts on these ideas about task teams or structure? Well, you're thinking. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
Hi, Rebecca. Hi, everyone. I think all the ideas and suggestions have been great, but at the same time, my opinion will be, I think not to put too much thought into it, since we want it to be formal but not too formal, right? Because sometimes with these communications and understanding what tasks or who should do what, it's a process. It's the design comes in the process. So now, yeah, the design comes in the process. So I think we should just go with a framework that is workable for now. And eventually, as the activities unfold, then we'll know what to place where. Because sometimes with people, discussions and communications, it might be unpredictable. So it's as the process goes, then we can now tweak and change when necessary. So I think my point generally is just to, whatever we're going with, it should be as flexible as possible.
Thanks, Hasbi. I would second that. I don't think anyone has energy to spend a lot of time developing like charters and a lot of and I think our experience to date has been that the learning collaboratives have been very much sort of an organic thing where they've grown and opportunities, and it's a lot of the interpersonal interactions. But that said, we do need a framework for all that to happen.
Sure. But yeah, since we already have, if we're going with the model that has a secretariat and a focal person, if we're going to have an interregional conversation or communication, I don't think it's going to be really difficult per se. And I understand the points someone mentioned earlier, sorry, I've forgotten the name, about communication barriers, right? I don't foresee much communication barriers, and yeah, even if there is the situation arise, I mean, independently or individually, we can always use a Google Translate or something. It's also a learning process for all of us. At the same time, just like I said again, I think we should use a framework that is flexible enough, because sometimes these things change, especially when we're already rolling out activities.
Okay, thanks, Hasbi. Yeah, and there is from Ashit in the in the chat box. He's suggesting, I think, yeah, of course, what we're aiming for is transparent and accountability in our governance, so to speak, in our coordination. And he's saying technical, financial, operations, and management support are options. So I just saw that the time sort of got away from me, and it's now 7:57 in my time. So I think maybe we could spend just a couple minutes on next steps. I feel like we do have a little bit of a consensus here. And I think our next step needs to be to get something sort of down on paper, taking into these accounts, and also Hasbi's comments of not trying to be too, like not micromanaging too much, but having a sort of a clear idea to share with others. Any thoughts on like how to achieve that? I guess to be more concrete, options are that, Kate and I try to like take down these notes and we put them in a Google Doc and other people add on them, or if someone else wants to sort of do a pass at a sort of proposal and we share it with others, that would be great also.
I was thinking of the same model, the first one that you mentioned, Rebecca, about if, sorry, Kate, not to dump on you, but to put the core sort of principles down that we talked at, and pulling in the feedback that you've presented from from the others who have already commented. And then if those who are willing to take a pass at the document, and then maybe via email, we can come to some sort of agreement on those core principles and proposed structures, keeping in mind all the flexibility and the tenuous nature of those things. But yeah, I would be happy to comment and help fill out something if there was something to start with.
I like the way you're framing it, core principles and structures. I think that makes it, relatively simple job of pulling together our thoughts today in that way. Other thoughts? Yeah, I'm happy to do that with a little bit of review and help from you, Kate, and we can ask Meredith to help. We're trying to be cognizant here of making sure everyone is not just commenting, but also is creating. So, I think we can take your comments from today, and then people can engage with the document and, say, no, this doesn't work. How about this? So I think that's fine. And I guess what we would do is have it ready for folks to comment on, after the holidays, and maybe have a couple week period, and so we can have something ready maybe by the 3rd week of January, something like that. Does that sound like a reasonable approach? Any other counter suggestions, or anyone want to elaborate on that plan?
Hi, Rebecca. For me, that sounds good and realistic. So I would suggest we go with that.
Thanks, Paul. Yeah, so we're seeing, I'm just quickly looking in the chat, broad framework with flexibility for adaptation. And folks are saying, yeah, this looks like a good strategy. Okay, well, thanks everyone for your time this morning. I know this week is super busy as always, and I'm excited. I think we are sort of coming to some consensus that I can imagine taking to.
Thanks very much. Thank you.
All right, bye. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much, Rebecca. Bye.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.